My name is Marie-Charlotte Roques-Bonnet, and I would like first to thank the Belgian DPA, and specifically Cédrine Morlière, for inviting me to speak today about smart cities and smart privacy compliance. I will mainly focus on targeted risks assessment and the switch to privacy management programs. Briefly introducing myself, I've been working 20 years in data protection, starting in the academic field, joining CNIL for a few years, then US big tech companies, and I've been providing consultancy notably to smart cities in the last few years. My research today focuses on data protection engineering and the switch from consent management platforms to privacy choices one, and from risk assessment to privacy management programs. I've been working lately with ENISA, IAPP, and in the frame of the iDecide project I created a few years ago. EDPB recently appointed me as individual pool expert. But let's jump into our discussion. I will start first with smart cities challenges, then specifying smart privacy compliance, switching to data protection engineering being at the core of our discussion, before moving on towards a user-centric approach assessment. First things first, smart cities challenges. So I would like to summarize those with 5 topics. First one is personal data collection. We would tend in EU to start with a necessity and proportionality assessment. But in reality, smart city builders have to face much more practical and basic questions, such as where do I store data? How do I ensure security? How do I design data sharing and data spaces mechanisms? What is an acceptable level of personalization? And then going back to the necessity and proportionality assessment. The second topic is pseudonymization and anonymization of personal data. It will not start with SRB or Breyer case discussion, but more with either personal data in my statistics, analytics, or research data. If so, what is strong pseudonymization? Is the ICO approach, which is a bit more pragmatic than other EU DPA, the one I should retain? And how do I ensure consistency from a department to another? The third topic is telemetry. It will not start again with Article 5.3 of e-privacy directive and consent, but more with defining all applicable use cases. Do I have all use cases in mind? What are the risks for each use case? What are the TOMs, technical and organizational measures to be taken? And how do I frame data sharing? Data sharing on purpose is a result directly of what is a smart city by nature, a connected city in which any bunch of data would be connected with the other one, and the further use of data would be the rule. It's not a one-time sharing frame. It's a framing based on interoperability and data spaces. That is to say, framed by agreements that hopefully would be automatically updated one. The final topic is the AI training tools and the classification of risks. This is not where we start. It's more about data quality and how far we can go with personalization of data with compliance in mind. So the NIST risk management framework is a good starting point, and transparency and accountability would be also ways to assess how on the fly AI training tools could be designed. I take the liberty to be sharing the result of one of my contributions to ENISA's work. 2 years ago, we've been releasing a report on data sharing good practices. It's available online. And also last January, we've been issuing a report on EU data spaces. Beyond the EU practices, it's highly relevant for people willing to know how to start discussion between engineering teams and legal teams to set those data spaces. I've been working specifically on the accountability building blocks, and again, we'll be happy to share more. EU data spaces core principles could be used for smart cities regulation because they are based on the reuse of data, sharing as a rule, based on direct exchange of data or intermediary services. Technical and organizational measures are absolutely centric, and APIs and smart contracts are the tools under which interoperability could be relevant and, again, efficient and functional. Now that we reviewed challenges, what is smart privacy compliance? So I'll have this bold stance that DPIAs are not enough. But again, it might be quite logical. Connected cities are based on innovation, which is risk, so DPIA square, if I may. But there are far too many data processing, including personal data or de-identified data, making it so that classification into high, medium, and low risk might be clueless and much more than anything, not updated the way it should. So the good management of technical and organizational measures is absolutely the center of the discussions and the way to be solution making. It's not a one controller, one DPIA, but it's a joint controllership, several DPIAs assessment, with, at the end, TOMS being adopted. So based on this new landscape, which is an agile one, accountability governance is a starting point. NIST risk management framework make it clear. Data connections, data sharing, security regular updating are absolutely the first layer of assessment that smart city builders or controllers in smart cities should have in mind. Outcome-based approach on transparency and control rather than output-based approaches, that is to say, a DPA documented, are absolutely the new mindset to have when being operating in a smart city. And again, AI framing is on the fly. As we saw last year with generative AI, it's clueless to try to have a long-term view when you know that next week or next month you will have to climb on the new ways to regulate and upgrade your processes. So we observe that constantly evolving networks of risk framing put governance back at the center, meaning that accountability building blocks should also be specified. I will start with the first block, which is data sharing agreements. We already have, it's traditional, but we need to draft new ones. And most of all, we need to connect those, potentially automatically, so that we will not run late. Revamped internal mechanisms are the second building block, with policies, governance, procedures to be updated, and the risk-based assessment and controls. Finally, updated privacy management programs with internal assessment drafting, governance changes, procedures update, and a global impact activity are the ways to build accountability in a serene and efficient way. So the new compliance standards could be summarized, and this is what I tried doing in the ENISA report with few steps, 10 steps actually. Is the data protection law applicable? Is the first question. The second is about governance, the center of privacy management program, the lawful basis, which is quite traditional. But then we have this range of outcome-based assessment to carry out. It starts, of course, with risk assessment, and then transparency, fairness, and rights, but also information security. Then the responsible data sharing and its agreements are to be linked directly with the settling and definition of accountable innovation in a smart city, what it is, and how all responsibles would be liable, that is to say, joint controllers, processors, sub-processors, and third parties. And quite classically, data transfers and training and awareness have to be framed. Now, let me take a step back and go back to a study that will be released publicly online in a few weeks. I've been working with some colleagues, Steve Wood and Seb Page, on reading all strategies available online from DPAs to know how those strategies can be compatible with smart cities and at least being digital first. So our conclusion, I would say, or preliminary conclusion, is that such strategies are smart. Smart as specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely in the objectives they set. They are outcome-driven, consultation is key, and they have ex-ante and ex-post objectives as a regulator. Again, if you want to know more, you can go and read the report. So the core points to be addressed now are putting back data protection engineering at the center. So data protection engineering is really what I focus on, and I've got a legal background, but this is the only way to have a the possibility to keep pace with the way smart cities are built. So automation of compliance is something we know about. All controllers, or most controllers, at least when they have large-scale data processing, have to automate compliance with privacy incidents management, risk assessment, the relation with third parties, compliance demo, or the mapping of data and personal data. The second point is about ex-ante and ex-post governance. Data search across databases, or to put it more simply, tagging of data and the capacity to go back to such data and categories of data is essential. It is built upon a tight and clear taxonomy, and such taxonomy has to be regularly updated. Data sharing procedures, access controls, and APIs wrap up how ex-ante and ex-post governance should be designed. Thirdly, accountability in practice. So, of course, it's policies. This is something we are used to. Internal processes, external processes, risk assessment agreements. But PMPs also are a way to elaborate more on how to be accountable, because each entity has their own requirements and challenges. So the question now is for DPAs, but also for accountable controllers and processes, to know whether SaaS tools are needed. That is to say, is internal compliance enough? Can we humanly face all those challenges? Do we need assistance? Do we need an AI and compliance copilot? And I pick the word. Do we need to have an integration and a way to embed AI in our own processes to comply? And I guess the answer is yes, of course. I've been running all those reflections along with IAPP colleagues. We have this International Data Protection Engineering Board in which we try to map out what is needed. This is a draft, and please don't quote me on that, but we start assessing what's going on in the physical world, online environment, and now AR, VR, and metaverse environment. We wrap up having this view on a user-centric approach to have a smart privacy regulation. And this is a more personal project. My first initial observation as a researcher was just saying GDPR is now here, but in practice it's hardly implementable just because we use far too many services online, and we cannot set our privacy choices or consents for each website and each use of our data. So this is why I created the ID Side project in 2019. A project that has been contributed lately to the reflection carried out by EU Commission DG Connect on the cookie pledge. And we could contribute, and having also a say in the public consultation carried out by EDPB. And please note with me that this pay or OK model task force has been discussed in the last 16th of January plenary. The problem we try to share about, along with the EU Commission and the EDPB, is the fact that we are completely overwhelmed by all those choices we have to make all the time. A good example is cookie banners, of course. And we were just thinking that it's not consent that should be monitored, but my, by default, privacy reasonable expectations or choices. Instead of having to set all my choices website per website, which actually I don't do in practice because I don't have time, those websites would consult my default choices because those would be following me wherever I browse. And sometimes I could grant a specific authorization to some of those. So what we need now is a privacy single sign-on, and this is what we try to design with the ID Side API. A by default privacy set of choices that are my reasonable expectations and browsing seamlessly along with me with a cookie so that I can provide specific consents only as needed. So this is our first achievement, having our privacy choices following us wherever we browse, notably and specifically concerning cookie banners. The Light Web patent is what we've been now doing to empower smart cities to accomplish more. And let me summarize here this way. We have our by default privacy choices that are shared everywhere. And when we want to provide specific different consent, we can do that. So now, thank you for bearing with me. It was a quick overview of what I've been researching into lately, and I will be happy to debate that later on with you, face to face. Thank you again for remotely bearing with me, and have a nice conference. Bye.